Fuck the king. That is, of course, Sandor Clegane, aka the Hound, from George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. And in light of the No Kings protest this past weekend, I second those words. Alright, we are back again. And as I mentioned an episode or two ago, I was going to demonstrate my 30k Death Guard scheme on something a little bigger than the bog standard troop. So I recently picked up the Death Guard Combat Patrol and has the Rhino in there. And while this is 40k Death Guard and they typically come in the green, I thought it would be cool to start giving them the 30k livery. I've been really pumped on how this has been coming out, and it has me wanting to go back to my older Death Guard and bring them up to the same standard. That said, though, my Death Guard is an army I've gradually built over the past 4 years that I've been in the hobby, so it does kind of show and document like the evolution of my painting and skill and style. But I don't know, that'll be a decision for later. For now, I am painting the Rhino, so let's get into it. I do want to note that you'll see some simple and minor modifications I made to it. You know, I wanted it to feel a little more Death Guard specific without being like too over the top with like the teeth and the tentacles and boils and shit like that. So I went through some of the leftover Plague Marine bits and I pulled a few little things to add as some greebles. I took bits from the various spewers in one of the spewer backpacks, and then I made them into like a chemical emitting fume spire thing that's gonna be, I guess, cranking out like the afflicted zone. And then the last little add-on I did was like a little relic that came from the Death Shroud bits, and I have that hanging off the gun turret, just chiming around as he's just fucking cranking it out. But anyway, getting into the paint job. So, starting out, as always, we do a flat black prime. I used a rattle can for this, but of course you can use any means of priming that you'd like. Next, I dry brush the whole tank to appreciate it. I use an off-white paint when dry brushing. This sets us up with some nice transitions of light and shadow that we follow with some speed paint. The speed paint, being transparent, will allow the appreciated highlights to show through. Gives us like a really nice dynamic undercoat. With the speed paint, I wet blend like a sickly green and a brown for some visual interest and to suggest varying degrees of decay. Once we're done with the undercoat, we move on to the main event of the paint scheme, stippling on the same off-white I used to dry brush and pre-shade the Mini. To do this, you want to work in thin layers. When stippling, you're choosing a section or panel of the model, and you're starting from the middle, and then you're stippling outwards to just near the edge, but just short of it. If you start with a very thin layer of paint, you can totally go all the way to the edge, but only on that first coat. After that, you want to gradually tighten the stippling pattern, having the most opaque part be near the center. This will give the impression of chipping and grime building up in the recesses and chipping off of like corners and stuff, and the paint being less disturbed like in the middle of the panels. If you prefer a smoother looking version of this that's not stippled, you could totally do this whole thing by just dry brushing over the green and brown with the off-white. Not only would it look more smooth, but it would be way faster too. But that said though, I go the stippling route for the sake of having what I think of as just somewhat more like painterly look. I enjoy the brush strokes and the irregularity. I think this is particularly successful with the 40k Death Guard too, seeing that they're in a constant state of decay. So it's kind of cool to think of like their armor like rotting and shifting and sort of like this pestilent, dead, alive thing. I don't know, it's neat. Next up, I get a little funky with these AK paint pens I've had. I've had them for a little bit now, and they're a lot of fun to use. If you haven't heard of them or seen them or used them, I highly recommend them. They're particularly fun for like easily adding little pops of color and highlights to a finished miniature. In the case of the Rhino, I use the silver to mark up the impact indentations in the armor and around the edges. With the orange, I sort of treated it like it was like a rust color, and I made like little streaks running down from the impacts. I don't typically get like too into like proper weathering, but it sort of got a wild hair, I suppose, and it was a fun little exploration. Next, I moved on to everything else. For the Havoc turret launcher and the combi weapon, I just went with black. For the organic and like plague creating chemically bits, I wet blended a purplish red color with yellow. I used the yellow on the surface of the tank where the organic bits, like connected and whatnot, and I made it look like they were sort of like leaking and staining the surface. To do this, I do a quick back and forth of applying the paint and using a cleaned wet brush to wick away and like feather out the color so it doesn't look like a blatant stain on top of the tank. You want to do this as much as possible with speed paints, otherwise they leave like this not so desirable watermark looking stain. Next up are all the silver bits. I used gunmetal for all these. For the rocket tips and fuel tank on the combi weapon, I went over them with a red speed paint, which I eventually highlighted up with one of those AK pins again with a red. For the other metal bits, I went over them with a metallic brass. And for the one flame that I had on top of the little spire thing, I used plasmatic blue, which is this like delightfully punchy, transparent blue speed paint. It's one of my favorites. The final steps are the wash and then the cleanup highlights. So I primarily wash the recesses and I try to clean up as much as I can on the flat areas with a wet brush. As always, when washing stuff, you want to be careful about pooling. Be sure to police any areas that have pooled too much. Once the wash is dry, I come back in with that off-white that we started with to touch up some of the areas that are too overly stained from the wash. Next, I come in with a dry brush of tan, blend some of the elements, and to edge highlight certain parts. After that, the model is essentially done. You're left with this really dynamic looking model with some like flavorful presence. I'm pretty happy with how this came out, and I still plan to add to it a bit, I think, soon. I recently started using the airbrush, and with it, I was just messing around with some stuff, and I used a brown speed paint as like a filter at the base of the like track guards over one of my Heresy tanks, and it looked really good. You know, it gave like this nice like dirty kind of grimy stain. So I want to do that the rest of the way on the Heresy tank, and then eventually on the Rhino. I think it'll just add a little bit more depth, and it'll be really nice. But that is how you execute this paint scheme on a bigger thing, on a vehicle. It's essentially the same as, you know, the other paint video I made. Same steps, same concepts, and yeah. So hopefully, if it seems scary to do it on a big thing, hopefully it no longer seems scary, and this is a good thing to guide you along. Along with knocking out the tank this past week, I also did this paint scheme on Mortarion, the Demon Primarch. I did this commission for a friend of mine, and he, said to just kind of paint it however I wanted, and he kind of gave me freedom with that, and he said to, if you want, just match it to your army. So I kind of did that, and he turned out pretty awesome. I'm really excited about it. Hope he'll be excited as well, but we shall see. But yeah, that is the Death Guard scheme. That is my Death Guard scheme that I've been doing for the past few months, and I don't know, it's a lot of fun. I think it's a really successful scheme. It is fun to do. It's a little time consuming, but I don't know, I think it looks cool, and it's worth it with the end results for me. And then maybe you can follow along and find out if it's worth it for you, or maybe it's just a one-off thing and you'll call it there. I know I definitely want to take a break from the Death Guard a bit. I've painted quite a bit recently. I did, I think 5 Terminators, Mortarion, this tank. I built and primed a bunch of others. So I'm not Death Guarded out by any means, but I just want to paint something different. So I'm going to start probably painting some bolt action stuff. Or maybe the Knight. I got my Cerastus Knight that I built a while ago. Maybe I'll get back to him to mix it up. Another big fun thing. But I think that's going to be it for me for now. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you liked it. If you did, be sure to give it a like. If you got something to say or have any questions, be sure to leave it down in the comments. And if you dug the video and you want to see more like it, or just see what else I get into, be sure to subscribe. Well, once again, that is it for me for now. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you in the next one. Peace. Today is June 16, 2025. Here are 7 dice. Today's numbers are on the D20, 20. On the D12, 2. On the D10, 10. On the percentage die, 60. On the D8, 6. On the D6, 1. And on the D4, 4. Those are today's numbers.